Hello, my name is and today I wanna show you how I did this illustration of 3 Cyclopses and a pig chilling in a forest. The first thing that I did was to create this guy in Zbrush. I did not record the process of modeling it because I still don't feel confident in Zbrush enough. So basically the whole video will be just me doing trial and error, so I wanted to just pretty much skip it. But for this guy, to model it a little bit easier, I bought these 2 tutorials, and if you have any spare money, I really encourage you to buy these 2 things, especially if you are learning anatomy, because without them it will be impossible for me to pretty much sculpt this guy. The next step was basically just to put the model in the front view in the Photoshop and just to start drawing all over it to see if I will be able to come up with some interesting concepts and some designs, or maybe just to give myself some cues how I want to develop this project further. And around it you can see a lot of references for some sort of a primitive like clothing, like a lot of Neanderthals, cavemen and stuff like this, because I wanted him to be a little bit more like rough, a little bit more like primitive, just from the looks. So also on the left you can see some references from the Heroes of Might and Magic, from the Stronghold units, because I am playing a lot of Heroes of Might and Magic 3 recently and felt the urge to make some sort of an illustration in the vibe of this city, because I had some good games with this city, so I just decided to give it a go. Especially that I have never pretty much illustrated or drawn any type of Cyclops, so I felt since it's a really typical fantasy creature, I will give it a go. It will be an interesting experience, especially since I wanted to change my pipeline a little bit, so I will start with 3D, which I usually don't do, and then go to 2D, and then back to 3D, and then back to 2D. For the references, as again and as always, as I can tell you, it's good to use them. Of course, you don't always need to use references, but it won't hurt you, especially if someone will tell me to draw some sort of a caveman. I believe I will be able to do it pretty much okay-ish, but with the references I will get a lot of cool cues, like a small tips how something can overlap on something, so it will pretty much broaden my visual library. It will just be better in the end. For the face I wanted to go with something a little bit more animalistic, so I wanted to include some ape-like features or something like this, and I searched for a lot of different references where I could see what basically makes the face look primitive. And in this case it was like a huge eyebrow, like a very really developed part of the forehead, flat features on the face, so it was pretty much fitting my Cyclops pretty much perfectly. And for the references, because I also wanted to draw some of the things without using any 3D, I just took some photos of myself, just quickly edited myself to look like a Cyclops, and maybe it was not the perfect reference, but it was enough for me to see how the emotion will feel on the face with one eye. And it was kind of weird because I'm not really used to looking at something with one eye, and it was kind of baffling how different I will see the emotion if there is only one eye on the face. Like it's kind of amazing how much or how different the emotions on the faces are when you have 2 eyes instead of like just one eye in the central. It pretty much, you always look like you saw something for the first time and you are really excited, or if you are afraid, or if you are angry, or just stupid. It's really hard to look intelligent if you have pretty much the only eye on the forehead. So it was kind of fun experience. It was funny to draw, and I don't really put a lot of effort into these sketches. I just wanted to get a grasp on the proportions, on the emotions, on different sides of the faces. And after doing 5 sketches, I decided I will make 3 more with a little bit better quality, with a little bit more developed proportions. So yeah, it was nothing special. I just wanted to prepare myself for painting the final illustration, because I strongly believe like preparing yourself to do a little bit bigger task will just make it easier in the long run. So This way I will be able to understand better what I'm painting and pretty much think about the problems I might encounter in the next parts of creating this project. So it was a lot of fun, especially with the reference that I made out of myself. It's kind of funny how much you can take out from your face or from your muscles and everything, because later you will also see me using my arm to paint an armpit in the Cyclops, but I will tell you about this later. And it was pretty much everything in terms of drawing. The next thing that I did, I tried to rig the model because I wanted to pose everything in 3D to prepare for myself a proper 3D base for the painting, but rigging by hand was extremely hard and was extremely painful and nothing was working how I wanted, so I decided to try some sort of a thing called Mixamo. I saw a guy from Flipped Normal to use this thing to pose his model, and I decided to give it a try. So basically you just upload your model in OBJ file and you show the program where are the elbows, knees and wrists and where is the groin, and after doing so it will pretty much take care of all the rigging that you want to make. So it's not ideal, like the animation are not perfect, but for the visual thing and for the posing, if you know you will be painting all over it, it's more than enough. And it's kinda amazing for me to see how my model is moving in 3D space, especially since I'm not a 3D artist, and being able to create some sort of a model that is moving was kinda mind-blowing for me. So I will only wait if they will include the option for some sort of a four-legged creatures, because at the moment you can only make some bipedal ones. So as you can see, it looks pretty okay, it looks pretty natural in terms of movement, and the great part about Mixamo is they have over 40 pages of animations, and I guess it's around 50 different animations per page, so it's like 2000 animations or even more, and each animation have a lot of frames in it, so it's basically endless resource of things that you can pose, and pretty much all you need to do is just to download the file later, put it into Blender as I did, for example, but you will see it later, and just to bake the animations, so this way you will be able to create a nice looking model. And this is pretty much how I felt after making it all work. It's a good interpretation of what my brain did. So yeah, Mixamo is quite amazing, and if you are struggling with rigging, it's a really good thing to look into. And here you can see how all the Cyclopses that I posed, that I animated, are looking in the same place. So I was going for something like drinking, sitting, enjoying themselves Cyclopses, and here are all the poses that I liked, that I felt will be fine, will be working nicely in an illustration, because for the illustration I wanted to portray some monsters in a daily typical life situation, so instead of being angry and everything, I wanted to show them enjoying themselves, like having a good time with friends, with some barbecue or some campfire, drinking and everything. It was quite heavy to make because the files were really not optimized, but it was a lot of fun. And in here also you can see how the scene is looking. For the ground I used photogrammetry, so basically I took my camera, went to the forest, took some photos of some objects and placed them into the Mehsroom, and it pretty much created 3D model based on the photos. And on the right side you can see the render that I started with the first try on the illustration. It was like a lot of fun. I really enjoy placing everything together in Blender, so it's nice. And after 2 hours of painting I got to this stage, but I really disliked how the illustration was going. I kinda was not feeling the composition. It was kinda flat for me and kinda like really typical. So I decided to expand my 3D model and to add a little bit more elements like the crates and bottles, a little bit more trees to add more ground to the ground. So basically I just duplicated some modules that I created previously, and tried to search for some free models for the barrels and for this cauldron on the campfire. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it's crazy what and how quickly you can do all of this stuff if you know what you are doing. And for me, I was not knowing what I'm doing, and it was still quick. And for the 3D, I decided to use Blender because 1, it's free, and 2, there are like 1,000 tutorials online you can choose from to search how to make pretty much anything in Blender. So it was really refreshing to work with 3D because I usually don't do it a lot. Like usually I go with the bare minimum in terms of 3D, but in this case it's pretty much the most complex scene I have ever created, and it was a nice experience. I really feel like developing this idea, this whole workflow further, will only benefit me in creating a lot of illustrations quicker, especially with all the ground modules that I prepared for myself, because it took some time to make them, but now I pretty much can use them and utilize them in every single illustration that I will do, so everything will go only faster from now on. So it was a really interesting thing to learn. And for the illustration, because I guess the illustration is the main thing in here, I had the idea of creating some sort of a painting where you will be able to see a thing that usually is represented in a really aggressive manner, because usually when you see some sort of a monster or something like this, it's usually screaming and trying to kill something, or is really dangerous. And it kinda felt for me it will look interesting if I will try to portray a monster in a daily situation. So for example, like sitting next to the fire camp and just enjoying themselves, because you don't really see often this type of things in illustrations or in movies. I guess in Hobbit there was a scene where 3 trolls were just doing something next to the fire pit or campfire, but still they had some malicious intent, so it was not like just a calm, chill space for them in terms of the narration point of view. So I really wanted to go and try making them just look having a good time or something like this. So it was a really interesting challenge. And in here also you can see the arm of Thor, Hafthor Bjornsson, because I was trying to paint the armpit area, but armpit area is my biggest enemy at the moment. Like I cannot understand how all of these things work in there, and the inner side of an arm is just weird for me. So if you have a problem, just use reference, and I guess it will help you overcome all the obstacles that you might encounter while painting your illustrations and anything. The second thing that I wanted to make to achieve with this illustration was to put myself in a situation where I know I will have some problems with it, because I'm not really used to painting like stuff with the really strong spotlight, with a really strong light going from one place, and that is lighting the objects from the below. So it was like the two things that I do really not often. So I thought it will be cool to try myself to do it and to test myself if I will be able to do it. And I had a lot of problems in these illustrations. I kinda discovered that I have a lot of problems with illustrations at the early stages of the painting. So as you could see, there were a lot of like adjustments, playing with sliders, trying to search for the good color and color scheme, color palette or anything, because usually when I try to paint something, I really need to explore a lot of things. Like I'm trying to see what will work, what won't work, and once I grasp like the overall feeling of the painting, and in here I pretty much believe I did what I wanted to do. But even now, after some hours after completing this thing, I already see things that I will rework, but it's not that important. And just after like getting the hands on the piece, when I kind of feel I understand what I'm doing, it was way easier for me just to finish the whole piece, because it took me around 4 to 5 hours to finish from starting on the render to finishing the painting, so it was pretty quick. But around 2, almost 3 hours of this time, I felt like I'm kinda still searching and trying to understand what pretty much I'm doing and how to grab and how to approach this piece. So for me, usually the beginning phase is really the hardest one. And yeah, also in here I was experimenting a bit with the different color scheme. So instead of painting in RGB, I tried painting in lab, because recently I discovered lab color scheme works a little bit better in terms of mixing colors when you paint, so you don't get these ugly moody colors when some colors are overlapping, and it kind of works in a little bit more natural way, in my opinion. So painting in lab is really interesting for me, especially since the layer styles, not layer styles, but the overlay, soft image, etc. are working in a manner that I kinda expect them to work. So they work in a really more natural way, I think. The screen works more natural, the multiply works a little bit more natural, like you don't get all this black and muddy stuff going on inside of it. Of course, you cannot use some of the blending modes, I was talking about blending modes. You cannot use some blending modes because of some weird math stuff that I don't understand, but it was just enough for me to use for the basic painting. And if you never painted in lab, I really encourage you to try. For me it was kind of refreshing, it was a lot of fun. In here also you can see that I am trying to discover or trying to work on the shape on the foreground of the tree on the foreground, because I more or less I knew what I wanted to include in there, but I was not so sure about like this huge thick trunk of the tree on the foreground. So I decided to go with something a little bit more subtle, with a little thinner shapes, like with a little that will be just lighter on the composition. And in here also you can see a pig, and the pig is, from the narration point of view, kinda important for me, because I wanted to show some sort of a heart going inside of this guy. So it creates, it's small thing in the composition, but it creates this nice little story where you can imagine you have 3-4 meter Cyclopses that are pretty much terrifying, but they are just sitting, drinking, having a good time, and maybe once when they were riding some sort of a farm, they just stole a pig, and instead of eating it, they decided to pet it and to raise it as their pet. So looking at the Cyclops with a pet pig will be a little bit more interesting thing, in my opinion, than looking at the Cyclops who is moving his flail at something and trying to destroy something, or trying to kill someone. So it was also one of the ideas that I had, so it will show this a little bit more human part of the monster. But yeah, it was fun. And for the details, when I felt I kinda grasped the idea what I wanted to do, I tried giving them some like cow hides on them and some tattoos, because I felt like if you're a giant cyclops or a troll or something like this, and you kinda living in the woods, living in the wild, having or getting some like tribal tattoos or something like this will really fit to the whole narration, like the whole lifestyle. So for example, if the drinking Cyclops once got stabbed with the sword, or maybe he broke a sword or something like this, and it meant really a lot to him, so maybe he decided to tattoo a sword on his forearm on the inner side. So just a small addition, but like all of these small things combined together are creating like a really interesting, really nice narration to the whole piece. So I felt it will be okay. And especially since they are sitting in free, like usually when you go out with a group of friends, there's always this one friend, in my case it's me, who is having this old like tactical rugged backpack. I have no idea how it's called in English language, but you can pretty much fit everything in this backpack and there is a still place in it. So I felt like giving one of the Cyclopses the backpack will show the nature of them a little bit better, like the nature I wanted them to have. And in here I changed the color scheme, color palette to RGB because I wanted to use some color dodge, and unfortunately color dodge does not work in lab. So yeah, basically the whole texturing, adding the fine details to the skin was done with the color dodge, and I really like this way of working. So it's pretty much everything that I can say about this project. Like, it's nothing too special, but I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you also did, and maybe you learned something new, and maybe you will discover some new techniques like I did in this case. And if you liked the video and enjoyed the video, just subscribe or press the like button, share it. If you have something to say or anything, just write it in the comments. I will gladly answer all of your questions. So thanks for watching and goodbye.